Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining me here at the ABA Division for Public Education YouTube channel and social media. I am very excited today to kick off a new video series we are doing, joined by two friends of the Division for Public Education and wonderful teachers digging into the Educating for American Democracy Roadmap. Over the next 7 to 8 months, I will be joined by our two fabulous guests to look at the roadmap, talk about why they're excited about it, and hopefully dig into some of the specific themes and explore how they sit at the intersection of civics, history, and law. Let me introduce our speakers before we get jumped in. I am joined by Jennifer Reidel, a social studies teacher at Options High School in Bellingham, Washington. Hi, Jen.
Hey, everyone.
I am also thrilled to be joined by Avril Kelly, a doctoral student at UNLV working on his PhD in curriculum and instruction. Avril was also previously a high school social studies teacher in Las Vegas, Nevada. Avril, it's great to have you here with us.
Great to be here.
So guys, tell me what the EAD roadmap is and why you're so excited about it.
Well, when I joined the EAD, at a time in my classroom, I was working on transitioning from teaching US history from chronologically to thematically. And so one of the first things that I've always was excited about was to see this combination of history and government come together. And so I was working on creating themes, and the EAD, when I read the original outline for the EAD, it sounded like something that I was headed towards in my own classroom. What I like about it is, again, like we said, it braids together history and government that allows teachers and students to explore historical questions, read primary documents, and go dive deeper into history than just a basic level.
Great. Jen, how about you? Why are you excited about the EAD and what does it mean to you?
I'm excited because I've tried to dedicate my life to teaching, in at least my professional life, to teaching civics and helping kids be equipped, particularly those that maybe come from marginalized populations where they and their families don't exactly feel part of the American story or part of our institutions. And being a civics teacher has just been a lonely, in my experience. There's passionate souls like Avril I meet across the nation at a conference and forge a friendship since that. But it's been a pretty lonely experience in teaching what I believe to be authentic and engaging civics. And that is the blending of law and civic structures and constitutional knowledge with US history. And so actually Avril turned me on to a particular resource on thematic US history teaching. And I've been doing that in the recent years and really, trying to figure out what works and what sticks. So when Avril had been hinting to me what he could share about the EAD and working on it. And then when I got to see it initially, I thought, oh my gosh, finally civics is being given its moment. And while the EAD has called it, we're in a Sputnik moment for civic education, I feel like it's a Sputnik moment for actually having a national framework and giving civics legitimacy. I was thinking about this today, that just like the framers knew they had to write things down to make them legitimate and make them honored and even debatable and interpreted. For me, on honestly a civic education level, having a national framework for civic standards legitimizes what Avril and I have known, and what you know, Kathy, our whole careers, that we're the basis. I mean, what we teach and seek to teach is the basis of civil society. And we're in a place where we're at currently because of not investing in civic education. So I am thrilled. While the EAD is not perfect, and I can see some things we're going to work through as practitioners, I'm thrilled that it's a talking point that I can share with colleagues, parents. I mean, even my dad wanted to know if civilians can download it from the website, people that aren't even teaching. So I'm just excited because I think it's an excellent tool to get us moving towards authentic and best practices in civic education.
So you guys have used some words that I wouldn't mind unpacking a little bit and talking about what exactly the EAD is. I've heard it referred to as a roadmap. We've talked a little bit already about themes. I know it mentions design challenges. Jen, you were saying it's maybe not a standard, it's a toolkit. What exactly is the EAD and how does it apply to a classroom teacher?
So the EAD at best, it's a framework, it's a guidance, it's a start, right? It's the beginning of a process that you have to work through. I think as a classroom teacher, we have to remember that we still are the designers of curriculum and creating learning experiences for individual students. So what I like about the EAD, and for me, where I was at in my own teaching, is that it provides me questions, it provides different themes, design challenges. So for instance, there is a theme on civic participation. You could use a civic participation in the history class to talk about how different groups have fought for struggles, right? Or you can use it in a civics class to teach civic participation, to have your students actually go out and civically engage and discuss what that's looking at. And so my favorite part about the EAD, it's a pick and choose. It's not required curriculum. You don't have to follow it in the T. It gives a teacher autonomy, it gives states autonomy, and it gives, I think, those of us in education autonomy to think about how we want to look at this new approach.
And I would add on to that, I think it's rooted in what we know to be best practices in pedagogy and inquiry. And it's rooted in this idea that we're not going to, gone are the days where civics means you memorize the 3 branches. There are definitely civic literacy and content that students need to know to effectively engage in society. I'm not saying there isn't, but that's not the ending point, which is where I think a lot of civic education had landed. Where it is now, the EAD is rooted in inquiry. So like theme 3 is we the people. And one of the concepts is, and I'm reading it, how can we ensure liberty and justice for all? I work at a school where we try to seek to be a project-based learning school. And I think a concept and even the way that the themes are phrased would be excellent, both inquiry projects as well as project-based learning topics that you could launch students into, and they could show their learning in a variety of ways. So I really do want to echo Avril that this is not a national mandate. This is not, I mean, in a way, and I know I keep paralleling to the Constitution, but that's somewhat of my love. Just like the Constitution is federal, and there are structures that guide us, and there are things that are national, things that are state driven. In this, I mean, a little more loosely, this is really guidance. This is support. This is nothing taking away from states' rights or state educational prerogative. It's just empowering it. There's nothing to stop a district or a state from encouraging educators and districts to use local histories, local case studies to answer these questions that are posed as inquiry-based kind of tasks for students.
Yeah, and Jen, go ahead, Avril.
I'm sorry, I want to add on how the EAD also advances the C3 framework, because the C3 framework is a design challenge, I guess, for teachers to be able to create inquiry in their classrooms. The EAD takes it another step further, where it creates the questions and provides you the resources in order to be able to promote that inquiry in the classroom. So to me, I think it combines both what we want from the Common Core of seeing more informational literacy in the classroom, as well as more student-driven inquiry design in the social studies classroom.
Avril, I'm so thrilled you mentioned the C3, because I think for us at the ABA, it was really important to see how the EAD essentially builds upon the C3. It's not a replacement. It's not competing with, that there is a building upon, and that it's taking inquiry sort of to the next level and providing the content framework for what was the inquiry approach of the C3, which is really exciting for us. So Avril, I know you—
Kathy, can I add something?
Yeah, go for it, Jen.
One more thing that I think is piggybacks on kind of the structure Avril's talking about. I know you're smiling, Avril. Is that, like, I am jazzed. My dream, my vision for my local district is that we would have a concerted K-12 scope and sequence of student civic, both academic education and experiential education. And I think this is the first time in my career, in over a quarter of a century, I've ever seen anything that is adaptable and useful and intended for K-12. It's not just living in the 7-12 realm, which is where civics tends to hover. And most of the resources out in society for civic organizations are leaning towards secondary. And I think my hope is we're going to see a shift where all these civic organizations are recognizing the need in elementary, because we don't have kids at the level we need them if the younger grades are not equipping them. And through no fault of why that isn't happening now, I'm not blaming them, but I'm excited because it recognizes the importance of that K-5 element in civic education for a student's career.
Absolutely. Avril, I know you were involved. You mentioned already that you kind of were involved in the process of building the EAD out and up. Can you talk a little bit about how you got involved with that, and what the process to build the EAD looked like?
Yeah, no problem. So there were multiple committees. That's the best way to describe it. This was a lot of committee work. And so you had the main like executive committee who were over the different smaller committees. And then we had one that looked at political science specifically and what students need to know before they graduate high school in political science in kindergarten all the way to 12th grade, as well as in US history. So we had a US history committee. And then we had a pedagogical committee that was going to recommend pedagogy that teachers are able to implement the EAD. And so it was a 300 people, nonpartisan group from civic ed agencies, teachers that are in the classroom, higher education faculty members, state organizations of education agencies, local education agencies, all coming together. And the one cool thing that I noticed in the EAD is that everyone in the group really supported the framework and the idea and the mission behind the EAD. When there was a little bit of confusion, it was more like on understanding the definition of a citizenship, or were we a constitutional democracy or a Republican form of government? And those were more the nuanced conversations that we had to have as a group. And then we decided to go with constitutional democracy as the concept that we would discuss throughout the EAD. And then that's where we had that conversation about the refoundings with the EAD. So it was a lot of committee work, a lot of multiple iterations. We would meet once a month because we originally started before COVID happened, and we all met at LSU. That was the first time we all met. And that was the first time we were given kind of this framework. And then we met once a month online, either as a large steering committee or within our smaller committees to discuss moving forward what would happen. And so I was also part of the pedagogy committee, and I was able to recruit other teachers from across the country to help share how they would approach pedagogy, what is their state requirements for social studies, and then how could the EAD assist with them.
Avril, did the experience in being part of the process to create the EAD impact or change in any way, or maybe refine your own approach and your own view on how to teach history and civics?
Yeah, I would say yes, it did, because it made me realize the push towards themes is more important than the chronological. I think that's what the most exciting is for me, is that really trying to get out of this chronological order where we're teaching event to event or person to person, and really diving deeper into issues and kind of getting a better understanding of our nation's history, both from the government side and the history side. And so to me, I was really excited to see this push for themes. And if I was still in the classroom, I definitely would be using it to promote themes.
Yeah. Jen, can you talk a little bit about how history and civics sit together in your classroom, and how the EAD roadmap can maybe help support you and other teachers in teaching these two topics together?
Mm-hmm. I think that'll be one of the greatest things initially the EAD does, as it becomes understood, just like the C3 had to break through people's understanding because it was new and it was a different way to think about learning within social studies. So for me, the EAD, number one, to get people to understand that civics, true civic understanding, is an understanding of structures and participation embedded in historical moments. And that, and Avril and I know, and any other educators watching know, that's where the sweet spot lies, is this idea of when kids get case studies and they can say, okay, our nation met our ideal that we seek to be as a people, or no, we fell short. We were not the better angels of our nature. What did we do? And how do we arrive at that moment? So like examples would be, and I mean, I'm always, my tried and true go-tos. I love my court cases, because court cases are stories about people in a historical moment, and they represent so much more than the paper that they're printed on. They represented all of the societal impulses that help interpret the law in the way it is. And so an example I'd give to show how easy an educator can blend the law and history, is 1952 case of Youngstown versus Sawyer. President Truman takes the steel mills. He claims he can do so as commander-in-chief because the military needs the bullets. That didn't go too well with the owners of the steel mills, with private property and their onus on capitalist structures. And so you have this tension, and within this one case, sure, it's a window into the Korean War. It's a window into the Cold War. It's also a window into limited government in a civics-oriented framework, looking at how far do we allow executive power? It's a window into judicial review, and checks and balances. And so I think perhaps the traditionalist approach or old school approach would have been, let's just teach definitions of checks and balances, separation of powers. And when students don't get something to hang their hat on and actually apply the understanding to a case study, and then what's really effective is to show, well, in this moment, this is how this system interpreted this case. And then can you show, so in that case, we know Truman gets slapped on the hand and said, no, Commander-in-Chief does not go that far. You don't have the executive power to do so. But then when you can pose another question of executive power to students in a different historical moment, they can compare and say, no, wait a minute, how come in this moment the president was allowed to intern Japanese Americans without any due process in the Korematsu case that was still exerting presidential power in wartime? And right there you have you're hitting multiple themes within the EAD. You're hitting both the subjects of civics and history. And I guarantee, and I know for a fact, kids just remember it because it's a story instead of some isolated multiple choice question at the end of a chapter.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Jen. Avril, how about you? Any reflection on how the EAD combines, or what the intersection is between civics and history, and where the legal lens, because I am the ABA coming at you, can apply to this?
Oh my gosh, it takes me a second. I gotta sit and think. This is actually gonna take me a second.
Okay, that's totally fine. Jen, I loved your idea of explaining the case studies. One of the things we think is so important at the ABA is really using case studies to tell the narrative of how an idea or a value has changed over time. And for me, the excitement of the EAD is sort of just taking that idea and rotating it a smidge. It really allows us at the ABA to refine what we're doing with the case studies that we already have and sort of repackage them in a slightly different way, or put a slightly different lens on them to really provide that thematic pull through what the legal system has done. And so I love the idea of being able to use case studies and the legal system and the federal judiciary or state and local court rulings to be able to tell some of those stories.
I just used your resources from our summer institute that Avril and I met at, that you hosted along with the Federal Judicial Center. I just made reference today about the Susan B. Anthony case that we studied the year I was back with you. Made reference in my history class today, but then we talked about the law, and we talked about how societal beliefs of women's roles in society influenced how the law was interpreted in her case.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the kids, they were hook, line, and sinker. So Avril, I think you're ready.
You actually got me stumped. It's only because I haven't been able to think about this for a while, so I'm a little stumped.
All right. Well, that's
Sorry,
the
I
idea.
Thought you were ready.
The idea of what we're doing over the next couple of months is to unpack the EAD within a legal framework and really talk about that. So that's our plug to say, come back, and Avril will have some more insights on this. Guys, I've loved this conversation. I think it's a great introduction to what we plan to do over the next 6 to 7 to 8 months, which is really talk about some of the specific themes and pull out some legal cases, some legal theory that you can apply to those themes, and really figure out how the EAD and the ABA can sit together. You know, the ABA is a partner and a supporter in the EAD rollout, and we really want to, I really appreciate the time that you two have volunteered to help us think about how the rule of law and the legal system can sit within the EAD. So with that, any closing thoughts for this afternoon's discussion?
I would highly recommend and encourage teachers to take a time. They have the time this summer after their crazy school year.
Yes.
At least look at the EAD, pick either a subject that they're really strong with or a topic that they really want to play around with, and just try it out in their own classroom. Just trial and error it in their own classroom and see if it's something they want to work with. Maybe they may have more recommendations. So definitely give it a try.
And I would add on to that, because I'm always adding on to your good ideas. In addition to actually looking at the framework document, the website that that's housed on is continually being added to with different organizations that are partners in supporting the EAD with materials. Because the recognition, from what I understood and what I've been told in the trainings that I've been going to, is saying that those that created the EAD and want to carry it beyond recognize you can't just give a framework to educators and then say, now figure out where to find applicable materials. So while it's not complete by any stretch, there really are lots of organizations are starting to put materials that they see pertinent to different themes that would relate. And so I would encourage, when people have time and a breath, that they play around on the resources section too, because that might actually help then inform, oh, I already teach that, or I could use this material to hit this question or this theme in the framework.
Yeah, Jen, that's great advice. I know at the ABA, we're thinking of what resources we already have on hand and how to retool them or repackage them if that's needed to sit within the EAD resource. And already, I know they are planning on really ramping it up in the coming months, but it already has some fabulous resources that really make it clear where it sits within the roadmap and how to support those thematic questions and design challenges. Avril, Jen, thank you so much for being here. I look forward to being on this journey with you in the coming months. And to our audience, look for us, and we shall be sending you some updates. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.